Hi everyone. It's me, Bruce here. This morning's sermon did not get recorded, so I am here in my house re-recording it for you guys. And so we are in week 5 of our series called Kingdom Living, which is studying through Sermon on the Mount, which is a sermon that Jesus gave that spreads across Matthew chapters 5, 6, and 7, and we are going by it bit by bit. And so, diving in this week, we are talking about our enemies and how we should treat them and how we should interact with our enemies and those who have wronged us. So, I thought it'd be fun this week. And what we did in church this morning was to start off with some examples of famous enemies. And so, I will be screen sharing our sermon slides from this morning for this part. So, let me pull those up. And so, first off, here we go, they're coming. We have the Montagues and the Capulets, who were these two families in Romeo and Juliet. It's a famous story where they disliked each other and hated each other so much that when Romeo, who was from the Montague family, and Juliet from the Capulet family, fell in love, they had to hide their relationship from absolutely everyone other than this friar that they go to for advice sometimes. And throughout the story, these two families, they have these brawls and battles that even end with a few people dying. And this hatred, this enemyship of these two families even ends to Romeo and Juliet themselves dying, which I'm sorry if you haven't heard the story before and I just spoiled it. I was gonna say spoiler alert, but Shakespeare originally published a story in 1597, and I feel like after over 400 years, the statute of limitations is up. So, yeah, that's Montagues and Capulets. Great example of enemies. Moving on, we have Batman and the Joker. This one comes from the DC Comics universe, and they have done battle many times across comic books and TV show episodes and movies. And Batman is Gotham City's Dark Knight. He fights for justice and fights crime his own way, and he's kind of this vigilante. And the Joker is a villain and a criminal, and he's out for his own gain, and he's out to cause as much chaos as he can. And as you can guess, these two objectives clash, and these leads to these two being enemies and going head to head many times over the years through different forms of media. Our next example we're about to cover is a lot more serious than the others. This list is mostly light-hearted examples from fiction. This next one is real. From World War II, we have the Axis and the Allies. And like we said, this is a much more serious one. I want to make sure I don't come off as making light of this. But the backstory here is that in the mid to late 1930s, tensions around the world were rising due to the rise of Hitler and the Nazi regime in Germany. And in 1939, those tensions hit a boiling point, and Europe was at war, and World War II started. And by 1941, America and the Soviet Union had joined also, and the world was at war. And the Axis and the Allies were the two teams and alliances that formed in this terrible, horrible war. And after many years and many deaths and horrors and heartache, the Allies did emerge victorious, but this is one of our examples of enemies, famous enemies. And we're rounding the example out with a more fun example because you guys know me. You know what my favorite franchise is. So I had to put Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader on here, right? And so this one has some history. It has some backstory because before Vader was Vader, he was a good guy. His name was Anakin Skywalker, and Kenobi was his Jedi master. He was his teacher and his friend, and they were like brothers. But when Anakin fell to the dark side, these two became enemies. And over the next 20 years, they would fight and do battle 3 different times over the years, almost to the death each time. up until their third and final battle in Episode 4 in New Hope, which is the first Star Wars movie that ever came out, when their third battle ended in Kenobi's death. And so this was the first that came to my mind when it came to examples of famous enemies. But what do all of these have in common, all these enemy ships? Well, the answer is that they all involve heartache and pain, and in some cases death, and in one case is like we mentioned, which is a lot more serious, and World War II involved millions of deaths. Now, obviously we don't want these types of negative, harmful things in our life. So how do we avoid this fate with our enemies before it's too late? And I want to specify, because a lot of these examples that we just went through are these serious, they're just mortal enemy ships. And when I use the word enemies today, it doesn't have to be that strong. I don't have someone that I've fought to the death with 3 times. I don't know about you. I'm guessing not a lot of you do. Maybe you do. But when I say enemies, I mean someone who's wronged you or hurt you or someone you don't like. But getting back to our question, how do we avoid those negative, harmful results when it comes to our enemies before it's too late? And the answer is that, and this is our central theme, this is what we're talking about today, is we need to love like the Father. Love like the Father. That's a broad term that could mean a lot of things, but we are today talking about Matthew chapter 5, verses 38 to 48, and we're going to break this passage apart into chunks, and there's a lesson we can learn from each chunk that will help us to love like the Father. And the first way we love like the Father is that we need to turn the other cheek. Turn the other cheek. Matthew 5, verses 38 to 42 says, you have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, don't resist an evildoer. On the contrary, if anyone slaps you on your right cheek, turn the other to him also. As for the one who wants to sue you and take away your shirt, let him have your coat as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Give to the one who asks you, and don't turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. Now, you've probably heard the phrase an eye for an eye, right? It's a common phrase now, and it's been a common phrase for ages. And it's talking about this concept of whatever someone does to you, that you get to do back to them. For example, if they gouge your eye out, you gouge theirs out. Hence the phrase eye for an eye. But when someone wrongs us, we want to do that back to them. If they break something of ours, we have this urge to break something of theirs. If someone hurts our feelings, we want to hurt them also. But what we see here is we see Jesus challenging that thought, and instead he introduces a seemingly radical new response, and that is not retaliating at all. He says that if someone slaps your right cheek, to turn them the other also. And this isn't just in a literal sense. He's not only talking about slapping. It's about any time someone wrongs you or hurts you. Don't retaliate. Don't seek revenge, and instead rise above it. Be the bigger person. That's what God calls us to do. Turning the other cheek doesn't mean allowing people to take advantage of you or walk all over you, though. That's not what Jesus is asking. He's not asking us to be passive to injustice, and he's not asking us to be a doormat. He's asking us to prioritize love over revenge. And he wants loving him and following him to be more important to us than our human desire to get someone back. And if we are loving and following him, that means loving his people. Jesus gives a lot of examples in this section of the passage. The cheek, the cloak, the extra mile. And he ends with that extra mile. And that stems from a Roman custom that was in place at the time, where Roman soldiers or officials could carry loads and ask a citizen to carry their load for up to a mile, and the citizen had to do it. And as you can imagine, this was not a very popular or well received custom or rule. And so that's what Jesus is talking about here. But Jesus tells them that if someone makes them go that mile, to then go an extra mile. And the same message applies to us. It's not in the literal sense that we have to carry a Roman soldier's load, because there are no Roman soldiers around here. But it's this concept of when we feel wrong, or we feel slighted, or we feel taken advantage of, or even taken for granted, maybe. In that situation, Jesus calls us to rise above it and offer more to that person than what we need to do. That commitment will stand out to some people also. Seeing this kill them with kindness mentality that we're talking about and witnessing it in action could possibly be the thing that points them to Christ for the first time, because the world doesn't react that way. So when we do, it'll be different, it'll be noticeable, and it'll get people talking, and it'll get people talking about Christ. When we follow God, our part of that is that we should be trying our best to live like Him and mirror Him. Well, God's love is gracious and self-sacrificial, and if we are called to mirror that, then we're called to mirror that part of His love also, and that means us doing the really hard thing and putting the needs of others and what's best for them over our grudge and over our anger, and making them more important. When we adopt this attitude, we are not only following what God has called us to do, but it also shows our trust in God's justice, that we trust Him to tolerate and take care of things. Not tolerate, that we trust Him to take care of things and don't feel the need to go off and try to take care of justice on our own, because we put our full trust in God's justice. So, one day I was reading online about this really cool woman with an extraordinary story, which, by the way, shocker, I know, I do things other in my free time other than drink Mountain Dew and watch Star Wars and watch sports. You guys might not have known that about me, but now you do. But anyway, this woman has an extraordinary story. Her name is Corrie ten Boom, and she wrote this book called The Hiding Place. And during the Holocaust and the Nazi occupation of the Netherlands, she and her family helped hide Jews and keep them safe. And she was eventually sent to a concentration camp where her and her sister Betsy experienced unimaginable pain and cruelty and heartache and who knows what else. And Betsy even ended up dying in that camp. Now, years after the war, Corrie ten Boom was speaking at a church in Germany, and she saw a man in the audience that she recognized immediately. And she recognized him because he was one of the guards from that camp, and one of the more cruel guards that she remembered. And in that same camp, her sister died in. And after the message, the man came forward smiling and said to her, "How grateful I am for your message. To think that, as you say, He washed my sin away." And he extended his hand to her for a handshake. Now, Corrie stood there frozen. She said she knew what she had just preached was forgiveness and grace and the love of Christ. But her heart was filled with coldness. How could she forgive the man who had been a part of such strong suffering in her life? But in that moment, she silently prayed, "Jesus, help me. I can lift my hand. I can do that much. You supply the feeling." So she extended out her hand to him, and as she did, she said she felt a current pass from her shoulder down to her hand, in their joined hands, and her heart was flooded with love all of a sudden. She later said, quote, "I discovered that it's not on our forgiveness any more than on our goodness that the world's healing hinges, but on His. When He tells us to love our enemies, He gives us, along with the command, He gives us the love itself. You see, Corey didn't ignore the pain, but she chose not to strike back, and instead she extended grace and extended her hand when revenge would have been justified, when coldness and unforgiveness would have been justified. That's the heart of Jesus' teaching. That's what we're talking about here. It's not being weak or rolling over, but it's strength through Christ and through his love. When someone insults you, don't insult them back or come back at them with sarcasm or gossip. And sometimes that will be easier than other times. Sometimes that will be hard. Sometimes you'll have an argument with someone or have insults at you, and you think of just the perfect comeback line to say that'll put them in their place and get them to back off. And I'm not super clever, but I've had those moments occasionally. And here's the thing, as hard as it may be, when you're in that moment and you have that perfect snarky response in your head ready to go, hold off on that. Don't say it. And I know it's easier said than done. It's hard to hold off on it in that moment. But remember how Jesus calls us to respond in those situations. Another thing is that no family is perfect. There will be times when family members, even though people closest to us in life, hurt us or tick us off. And when those conflicts arise, try to be the bigger person. Ask the Lord to help you let go of whatever anger, frustration, or hurt, and be the first person to forgive and reach out that olive branch. It may not be easy, but it'll be worth it, and it will help grow not only your relationship with that other person, but your relationship with God also. We all need help at some point in time in our lives. And we all need God. That's true for everyone, which means at some point, someone who's wronged you or hurt you in life will be in need. And I want to challenge you guys as well as myself, when you find yourself in that situation where someone who has wronged you is in need, you may get the temptation to laugh, but don't. And instead choose to show them love and grace and kindness and do what you can to help fill that need. Treat them in a way that reflects that no matter what they have done to you or wronged you, that they are someone that was created by God and that is loved by God because they were and they are. Also, I would say refuse to take part in arguments and spats even when the other person has provoked you. Rise above the conflict and rise above treating people who have wronged us like a permanent enemy or like a permanent opponent, the way the world wants us to. Our second way that we love like the Father is that we need to pray for our enemies. Matthew 5, verses 43 to 45 says, "You have heard that it was said, 'Love your neighbor and hate your enemy.' But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of the Father in heaven. For he causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain to the righteous and the unrighteous." The world teaches us to love those who love us and hate those who hurt us. But once again, we see Jesus telling a different story. He tells us to love those who are our enemies and pray for those who persecute us. And loving our enemies isn't just about feeling. It also involves action. We need to put an action to this. We need to pray for our enemies. When we pray for those who hurt us, it's not just beneficial for us and our souls, but it aligns our heart with God's. Anytime we can do something to align ourselves and align our heart with the one who created everything, who sends both the sun and the rain, we should do that. We should be chasing after closeness with him with everything we've got. And part of chasing after closeness with him is praying for our enemies. Here's the thing, God doesn't limit his grace to the lovable, and neither should we. It's not our decision who grace is available to. If God decides it's available to everyone, and he has decided that, then we need to show grace to everyone. Look what happened with Jonah, for example. When God sent him somewhere that he didn't want to go because he decided that those people had done too much bad and they weren't worthy of hearing his message or getting grace or being saved. He thought he could run away from God and got on a boat the opposite direction of where God sent him and got swallowed by a giant fish before eventually being brought to the place God asked him to go, anyways. Don't be a Jonah. Don't run away from God. And don't try to make the decision of who's worthy of grace and who's not. Even everyone is available to receive God's grace and forgiveness, even those who you don't want to share it with. That's what he calls all of us to do, is show that grace and love to everyone that he has shown to us. Like we said before, it's in the eyes of the Lord, we are all his children. We are all created by him. And when we show love to and when we pray for our enemies, we are accepting and taking on that role of children of God, of imitators of his love. And the thing, too, is that praying for your enemy doesn't mean being buddies or best friends or letting the person back into your life or anything else along those lines. It simply means letting go of the negative feelings, letting go of the hurt and the anger, and letting go of the grudges that you hold. You know, I'm reminded of someone that's been in my life who I'm not very fond of, not necessarily because of anything they've done to me, but because of this person's relationship with my dad and how that's gone over the years. It's been a rocky relationship, and despite that rockiness, more than once over the years, I've seen my dad try to mend fences and try to put things on a good track, and I've seen him get burned every time, and that bothers me. And between that and just some other family-related chaos that this person has been involved in or been the center of, I just don't have a very good opinion of this person. And honestly, it's the only person that comes to my mind that I feel that way about. One thing that I pride myself on and try to do a great job of is being forgiving and being understanding. But this one person, I just have a hard time with that for whatever reason. But about a year and a half ago, God spoke to me and he told me it doesn't matter how I feel about that person, that I need to pray for them anyway, because God created them and he told me to. And it hasn't been easy, but I'm trying my best and God's helping me get better each day, and I'm praying for that person. I'm still not very fond of them. I still don't see myself having a relationship with them, but I'm praying for them. Praying for God's best for them and asking God to take that grudge out of my life. So what can we do on a practical level to make sure we're moving forward towards this goal? Let's start with this. I want to challenge everyone here, including myself, to think of one person who has hurt or wronged you somehow. For me, it's that person I was just talking about. But think of who that person is for you, and then let's make a goal to set aside time each day this week and pray for that person. It doesn't have to be a super long amount of time. It doesn't have to be a super deep emotional prayer. But the point is that we're doing it. We're setting aside each time to pray for that person who has wronged us. And whatever God lays on your heart to pray for them that way. And who knows what that'll bring or what that'll be, but pray for them and know that I'll be doing it alongside each of you guys. And that when we do that, we're obeying what God has called us to do. Ask God to change your heart towards people you struggle with, even if it's not someone who has hurt you or wronged you in some major way, but it's just someone who irritates you or annoys you or frustrates you or simply who you don't like talking to. This type of heart and mindset isn't easy, and we can't do it on our own. Hence why we need to ask God to help us with that change. A huge part of following God and knowing Him and walking with Jesus is loving His people, and that means all of His people. If you see someone you normally avoid, whether it's someone you're getting over being mad at, or even just an annoying coworker, instead of avoiding them like you normally would, do something different and bless them instead. Get them a snack out of the vending machine. Help them out with something they're working on, or even just say a kind word. Give them a compliment. It can be as simple as that. But like we've said before, it only takes one small spark to start a fire. That one thing you do can make a big difference for them. It can make a difference in your life too. It could be the thing that starts a changing of your heart and mindset towards that person. When you're in a season or situation of conflict, pray. Now, you may be thinking, I already do that. I always pray when I'm in conflict. But what are you praying for? A lot of us pray for resolution when we're in the middle of conflict. I do that. But we also need to be praying for God's best for the person we're in conflict with. How many of us do that every time when we're praying for conflict? I know I sure don't. I know I definitely need to improve, and I need to get better at that. But when we're in the middle of conflict with someone, when we're mad at someone, when we need to not just pray for a resolution to the situation, but pray for God's best for the other person as well. Our third way that we love like the Father is that we need to love without limits. Love without limits. Matthew 5, verses 46 to 48 says, For if you love those who love you, what reward will you have? Don't even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet only your brothers and sisters, what are you doing out of the ordinary? Don't even the Gentiles do the same? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. We've touched on this a bit already, but we're really going to hammer on this the next couple minutes. And that is that God's love is for everyone, and we are called to show that love to everyone. Period. Full stop. We are called to love everyone, not just the people we're super close to, not just the people we want to show love to. Everyone. That's who Jesus calls us to show love to. If we only love people that show love to us, we aren't reflecting Christ. In fact, we're doing the opposite. We're reflecting the standards of the world. And that's what the world teaches, is prioritizing yourself and matching the energy people show you and so on. But showing love to the people that show it to us is not difficult or impressive. Jesus points out that even the tax collectors do this. And in Jesus' day, that would have been a big statement, because tax collectors were looked down on and seen as morally inferior and morally compromised for what they did. And this just goes to show that it's easy to love those who love you. Everyone does that. But Jesus calls his followers to a higher standard, though. He calls us to a higher love, and Jesus calls us to show love to everyone, whether they treat us well or not. When Jesus talks about that higher love, he says in verse 48 to be perfect. And when he says that, he doesn't mean to be perfect in the sense of being sinless and doing everything right and always making the right decision, because that's obviously not possible and not attainable for us as humans. We are sinful beings by nature. What he is talking about, though, is being perfect and mature in our love and going beyond the simple and going beyond the easy of loving those who we like and who love us, and going beyond that to love our enemies and love those who we find difficult to love and don't want to love, but doing it anyway because that's what God has asked us to do. God's love for us is unearned. We don't have to do anything or give anything to get his love. He just loves us automatically, no matter what, which of course is incredible and life-changing and has huge implications if we let it. But have you ever stopped and asked yourself this question? If we are supposed to be modeling our lives after Christ and following him and living like him, and we don't have to earn his love, why are we making people earn our love? If we truly want to follow Christ and shape our lives after him, shouldn't we be trying and striving to love everyone? Without realizing it, we're doing this. We're putting limits on our lives, and we're limiting our love to those who love us first and who treat us well, and then loving them in response. We shouldn't be doing that, though. We need to love everyone around us like Christ does for us, and our love should not have to be earned. Fred Rogers, for example, better known as children's show host Mr. Rogers, very beloved man, quietly lived out a love that looked a lot like God's love. On his show, he welcomed everyone, children of different races, abilities, backgrounds. One example is that in a time when public pools were still segregated, he invited Officer Clemens, who was a black cast member, to soak his feet with him in a small pool, side by side, smiling. This was a very simple act, but it had a very powerful message that love doesn't exclude, it embraces. Mr. Rogers famously told every child watching his show, "I like you just the way you are," and he meant it. He once said, "Love isn't a state of perfect caring, it's an action noun, like struggle is." Loving without limits doesn't mean we'll always feel it. It means that we'll always choose it and choose to show it just like the Father does. So who are we actively choosing to love even though it's difficult? Do we have someone in our life that fits that? We need to break this habit of only being friendly to our friends and our inner circle, and we need to make sure we're making room for outsiders in our lives, not just enemies or people we don't like, but strangers who we've never met before, who we run into at the store or the gas station. It can be as simple as a smile and a wave to someone walking down the soda at Walmart buying your Mountain Dew, because I think everyone likes Mountain Dew, right? But it can be as simple as just that wave or sending it text to check in on someone you haven't talked to in a while. We also all need to learn to forgive multiple times. There will be people who hurt us in our lives more than once and who keep doing it to us. There will be people that tempt us to write them off because they should have learned better by now, or they've had enough chances. And those feelings are totally understandable, but we can't stop forgiving them. We can't write them off. If Christ had that mindset, we'd all be written off by now. We wrong him and we sin every day of our lives. So let's extend his grace to others that he extends to us. I'm reminded of a time in Matthew chapter 18, verses 21 and 22, where Peter comes up to the Lord and asks him, "How many times must I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? As many as 7 times?" And I imagine Peter probably thought he was giving this big outlandish number with 7, thinking he was being hyperbolic. But Christ responds by saying, I tell you not as many times as 7, but 70 times 7, in relation to how many times we should forgive. Now, I pulled out my calculator because math in my head is not my strong suit, and it turns out that 70 times 7 is 490. Jesus isn't saying 490 is the limit. He's not saying once we forgive 490 times, we can stop at 491. He's using a big number and using hyperbole to say that there shouldn't be a limit. We should never stop forgiving people. We need to learn to love people who are different than us too. People who vote differently, eat differently, talk differently, or even believe differently. We should be ready to show love to everyone, not just those who share similarities to us. Ultimately, we need to learn to model God's kind of love, not our own. We need to be modeling His love that doesn't have limits everywhere we go, in our homes, in our schools, in our workplaces. We need to be showing grace and patience and generosity to everyone, not just those who earn it. And I know it's easier said than done, but guys, that's what God calls us to do. So we need to be striving to do it. We need to love like the Father. Jesus didn't just preach these words, He lived them. He turned the other cheek when He was mocked. He prayed for His enemies as He hung on the cross that they put Him on. He was praying for them as they were doing it. He loved without limits when He died for those people and for you and for me and for everyone on the planet. So here's the question. When people look at our love, do they see a reflection of the Father? Loving like the Father isn't easy, guys, but it's possible because He filled us with His love. So this week, don't just love the easy ones, love the difficult ones also. Pray for your enemies, go that extra mile, and in doing so, you won't just be following Christ, you'll be revealing Christ. Thank you.